The sun had barely risen over the rugged outskirts of Sonora's desert, casting long, golden shadows across the sleepy little town. Inside Marv's coffee, the smell of fresh coffee and fried bacon floated through the air, as it did every morning. Seated at his usual corner booth, an old man stirred his cup slowly, his calloused hands steady, despite the distant chaos he could feel brewing. Outside, two strangers leaned against a pickup truck, laughing a little too loud, watching a young waitress with eyes too sharp, too hungry. Most in town averted their gaze, pretending not to notice. But not him. He watched, silent. And though no one knew it yet, the most dangerous man in 100 miles was about to break his vow of peace. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you are watching from. And if you like this story, click the subscribe button, because tomorrow we will have a new special story for you. The town of Redridge sat quietly on the edge of the Sonoran desert, a patchwork of dusty roads, low brick buildings, and sun-faded signs that creaked when the desert winds picked up. Life moved slow here, like the tumbleweeds that rolled lazily across Main Street. Most days you could hear the screen doors slam shut from 3 blocks away, and the biggest excitement was the arrival of the weekly produce truck. Marv's Coffee was the heart of Redridge, a squat, old building with flaking white paint and a green awning that had seen better decades. The aroma of strong black coffee, sizzling bacon, and homemade biscuits spilled out onto the street every morning, weaving into the very fabric of the town. A brass bell above the door announced every customer with a soft, nostalgic jingle. Inside, booths were upholstered in cracked red leather, and a jukebox in the corner hummed with tunes from an era long past. Marv himself, a wiry man with a grizzled mustache and a voice like gravel, manned the counter with the ease of someone who'd been doing it for 40 years. Locals wandered in at the same time every day, greeted by name, exchanging weather reports, and harmless gossip before settling into their routines. At the far corner, always in the same booth by the window, sat Samuel Sam Dalton. Sam was a man carved by time, lean but sturdy, like an old oak tree that had weathered more storms than most could count. His face was lined with the hard-earned creases of a life spent under harsh suns and harsher circumstances. His hair, once black as coal, had faded into a short silver cut that barely peeked out from under a battered brown cap. He wore the same thing most days: faded jeans, dusty boots, and a simple flannel shirt that smelled faintly of cedar and earth. He lived alone, out on a modest piece of land a few miles from town, where the desert began to stretch wider and the stars at night looked close enough to touch. His pickup, an old Ford with more rust than paint, was usually parked out front, loyal as a dog. Sam didn't say much, and nobody in Redridge asked much of him. They liked him that way. Steady, polite, always paying for his breakfast in cash with a quiet, "Thank you." No one knew about the chapters of his life. No one knew he had once moved through the jungles of Vietnam with a rifle slung over his back, and later through the sands of Iraq, where the heat and fear were constant companions. And Sam intended to keep it that way. This morning was like any other. The sun was already burning off the last traces of morning chill as Sam stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, staring out the window at the sleepy town beginning to wake up. A faint breeze lifted dust along the sidewalks. The same old dog lay sprawled across the hardware store's porch, and the flag above the post office hung limp, waiting for the afternoon wind. Marv, wiping his hands on a rag, shuffled over from behind the counter and leaned a hip against the edge of Sam's booth. "You heard about the trouble we've been having?" Marv asked, lowering his voice, eyes scanning the room out of habit. Sam looked up, his steel gray eyes steady and unreadable. "Nope," he said, his voice as rough as worn leather. Marv exhaled heavily, glancing toward the street like he expected to see something ugly at any second. "Couple of fellas showed up 2, maybe 3 weeks back. Outsiders. Been staying over at the old Walker place. You know, that rundown shack off Highway 8. Been causing a stir, stealing from the gas station, harassing folks, making life uncomfortable for everyone." Sam took a slow sip of his coffee, the wheels turning behind his quiet gaze. He said nothing, just listened. Marv leaned in a little closer. "Folks are scared, Sam. Sheriff's office is too far out to bother with small stuff. And these boys, they know it, acting like they own the place." Sam nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then set his cup down gently on the saucer. His fingers, though aged, were still strong, the kind of hands that remembered how to hold a rifle steady in the cowl. Worst kind of storm, but still he said nothing. Just let the information settle like dust after a passing truck, for now. The days that followed were like the tightening of a noose around Redridge. At first, it was little things, a missing gas can here, a few dollars lifted from the till at the grocery store. Then it escalated. Women started crossing the street to avoid lingering eyes and low, greasy whistles. And through it all, Sam Dalton kept his place. Mornings at Marv's Coffee, evenings tending to his small vegetable garden under the relentless Arizona sun. He watched the town shift around him, the air growing heavier, tighter, like a storm building without a cloud in sight. One afternoon, after finishing a load of firewood deliveries in his battered pickup, Sam pulled into the gas station at the edge of town. The place was nearly empty except for the cashier, a skinny, nervous kid named Cody, and leaning against the ice machine outside, the two strangers. They were young, maybe mid-20s, sunburned and smirking with the loose, dangerous energy of men who thought they owned the world. One of them, tall with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, flicked a cigarette butt near Cody's boots as the kid struggled to pump gas for a customer. Sam stepped out of his truck, slow and deliberate, his boots crunching over gravel. He kept his gaze neutral, non-confrontational, just an old man filling his tank. But he felt their eyes on him, that sharp, invasive stare, and he knew better than to return it. He moved calmly, lifting the gas nozzle, inserting it into the tank. Behind him, the two muttered something he couldn't catch, followed by a short, ugly laugh. Sam kept his face blank, but inside, something old and familiar stirred. A warning flare in his gut, a battlefield instinct honed long ago. He finished. Fueling, paid Cody with a respectful nod, and turned to go. That's when it happened. As he reached for the door handle of his truck, a hard shove sent him stumbling sideways. The gas station's floor rushed up at him, and he caught himself clumsily against the side mirror, pain shooting up his arm, laughter exploded behind him. Sharp and cruel. Well, look at Grandpa. The tattooed one sneered loud enough for everyone to hear. Better watch your step, old-timer. Ain't no one here to catch you if you fall. Sam straightened slowly, dusting off his jeans with the calmness of a man who had survived worse humiliations in places far more brutal than this. He turned his head, locking eyes with the two for just a heartbeat, a glance like cold steel sliding across a whetstone, before climbing into his truck without a word. The engine coughed to life, and he pulled away, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Behind him, in the rearview mirror, he saw Cody looking small, embarrassed, helpless. He saw the strangers grinning, victorious. And he felt something else gnawing at the edges of his conscience, something heavier than pride. Shame, not for himself, but for what his silence meant to this town. Back at his farm, the evening was falling fast, painting the desert in bruised shades of purple and gold. Sam sat on the worn steps of his porch, a cup of black coffee growing cold in his hands. He stared out across the scrub and sand, listening to the distant howl of coyotes, feeling the ache settle into his bones like an old, unwelcome friend. He told himself, as he had 1,000 times before, that it wasn't his fight. He had done enough fighting for a dozen lifetimes. This wasn't Vietnam. This wasn't Iraq. This was just two punks in a town too far from the law. And yet, when he closed his eyes, he didn't see Redridge. He saw the faces of boys and girls he couldn't save. The weight of promises made long ago, whispered over bloodied earth and under foreign stars. His chest tightened, and he pressed a hand against it, willing the memory away. But it stayed, burning, demanding. And so he sat there, as night swallowed the desert whole, feeling the slow, inevitable pull toward a decision he had hoped he would never have to make again. The next few days in Redridge felt heavier than the summer air. Word about the incident at the gas station traveled quietly, like a bad rumor seeping under doors. But nobody mentioned Sam. Nobody blamed him. In fact, most folks barely gave him a second thought. To them, Sam Dalton was just another fixture of the town, like the creaky porch swings or the battered pickup trucks that lined Main Street. An old man with a quiet smile who kept to himself. A good neighbor, maybe, but certainly not a man you'd expect to stand up against trouble. The fear that spread across Redridge grew naturally, like mold in a damp basement, fed by the absence of law and the knowledge that no help was coming. The two troublemakers, sensing the town's weakness, grew bolder. At the general store, Miss Patty, who'd run the place for 30 years, found her till short and her back door smashed open. One morning, at the park, teenagers whispered about being followed, about strangers offering them cigarettes laced with things no good kid wanted a part of. And Sam watched it all with a stone face and a war raging inside him. Each evening he drove his battered pickup back to his land, passing the old church, the boarded-up mill, and the slow, sorrowful decay of a place he once believed might outlive the noise of the world. He spent his nights sitting on his porch, the desert stretching out. Like a dark ocean, the stars scattered thick across the velvet sky. The nights were quiet, but not peaceful. Inside his chest, a storm brewed. One afternoon, Marv himself found Sam sitting in his usual booth, a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling beside him. Marv pulled up a chair without asking. He didn't speak for a moment, just rubbed the bridge of his nose like a man too tired to pretend anymore. "They scared Jenny yesterday," Marv said finally, voice low. Sam looked up slowly. Jenny was Marv's granddaughter, all of 16, with a bright smile and a fierce love for this dusty town. "She was closing up," Marv continued. "Said they wouldn't let her get to her car. Kept asking her questions she didn't wanna answer, laughing at her when she said no." Sam gripped the edge of the table. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough that the wood creaked under his hand. Marv studied him carefully, the way a man studies a lit fuse. "She's okay, Marv, said. "Shaken, but okay." Sam didn't respond. He stared out the window instead, watching a tumbleweed skip across the road, carried by a hot, restless wind. Later that evening, as the sun bled red across the desert sky, Sam found himself driving past Marv's again. He didn't plan it. His truck just seemed to turn on its own, slow and heavy, rumbling along Main Street as he checked the storefronts out of habit. That's when he saw her, Jenny, standing outside the diner, struggling to lower the heavy metal shutters across the windows. Alone. Sam pulled over, the gravel crunching under his tires. He stepped out, slow and deliberate, like he was afraid of spooking her. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the dry air. Jenny looked up, startled at first, then nodded, a shy, grateful smile tugging at her lips. Together, they wrestled the stubborn shutters into place. Sam said little, just small instructions here and there, his voice calm, steady, guiding. When the last latch clanged shut, Jenny brushed a loose strand of hair from her face and looked up at him. "Thanks, Mr. Dalton," she said. "Not a lot of people stop anymore." Sam nodded, his gaze softening. "You're welcome, kid." He watched as she climbed into her old Chevy and drove off, taillights disappearing into the encroaching dark. Standing there, in the cooling air, Sam turned slowly, scanning the town. The storefront stood silent and tired, the wind rattling loose signs and swinging a lone chain against a lamppost. Somewhere out there, he knew, the two strangers were plotting their next move, feeling bigger and bolder with every sunset that passed without consequence. Sam shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his worn jeans, the familiar weight of something unseen settling across his shoulders. Standing there, in the warm night air, listening to the desert breathe, Sam realized something simple and immutable. Some fights don't end. They just change addresses. And in Red Ridge, the fight had come to his doorstep. The decision didn't come with a trumpet blast or a lightning strike. It came quietly, the way dusk slips in when you aren't looking. Sam Dalton spent the next 2 days preparing, not with anger, not with rage, but with a steady, patient resolve. The same way he had once prepared for patrols through jungles thick with unseen dangers, or for long desert nights where the enemy was the heat, the cold, and the silence itself. First, he cleaned the old Winchester that had hung untouched above his fireplace for years. He loaded it carefully and placed it in the passenger seat of his truck. Then he waited. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. Late on a Saturday afternoon, Red Ridge's tiny main street buzzed with life. Families picked up groceries, kids licked melting ice cream cones, and the scent of barbecue drifted from behind Marv's Coffee, where they were setting up for the town's monthly potluck. Sam sat at his usual booth, sipping coffee, when the two strangers sauntered past the windows, their boots loud on the wooden sidewalk. They carried themselves like kings in a kingdom without law. One of them, the snake-tattooed one, shoulder-checked an elderly man stepping out of the pharmacy, sending the poor soul sprawling onto the sidewalk. They laughed. Then they take some beer and meat that the locals had brought to the potluck. Everyone looks on in fear and with their hands tied. Sam's jaw tightened, but he didn't move yet. Not here. Not with families nearby. He waited, patience coiling inside him like a rattlesnake in the brush. As the evening deepened and the potluck wound down, most folks packed up and drifted home, leaving Main Street quieter than it had been all day. The perfect time. Sam parked his truck a block away, stepping out with the Winchester resting casually in the crook of his arm. The warm night air buzzed with cicadas and the faint crackle of a distant radio. He moved like a ghost between the buildings, his boots making no more sound than a passing breeze. The two strangers had set up camp behind the old hardware store, sitting on overturned crates, drinking beer, their pickup truck parked haphazardly nearby. They didn't see him until he was 10 paces away. "Hey, look who it is," sneered the snake-tattooed one, rising unsteadily to his feet. "Gramps come to buy us around?" The other laughed and stood too, the two beginning to spread out instinctively, trying to flank him. Sam didn't hesitate. In a fluid, controlled movement, he closed the distance. Before either could react, he jammed the barrel of the Winchester into the gut of the taller one, the snake-tattooed man, forcing him back with a grunt of pain mixed with surprise. At the same time, the second man, thinking he was fast enough, went to grab a pistol hidden in his belt. Sam then quickly changed position, pressing the barrel of the gun hard against his temple, paralyzing him. "Don't even try," Sam said, his voice deadly calm. Sam's voice, when it came, was low and cold as the desert night. "Stay real still," he said. Neither dared move. "You're leaving," he continued, each word dropping heavy into the night. "Tonight." He shifted the barrel slightly, making sure both men understood. "I don't ever want to see either of you in this town again." The two troublemakers froze, their bravado draining away like sweat under the desert sun. Slowly, the snake-tattooed one lifted his empty hands in surrender, his buddy stumbling back toward the pickup, mumbling curses under his breath. They clambered into their truck without another word, tires spitting gravel as they tore down Highway 8, swallowed by the darkness. Sam watched them go, the rifle still steady in his hands, until the taillights disappeared completely. He stood there a moment longer, the desert wind ruffling his shirt, the silence pressing in around him like an old, familiar blanket. Then, without a word, he turned, walked back to his truck, placed the Winchester carefully across the seat, and drove home. The next morning, Redridge woke up lighter somehow, as if a storm had passed without anyone noticing. People went about their routines, sipping coffee at Marv's, opening shops, sweeping sidewalks, with a quiet, tentative hope. The strangers were gone. No one knew how or why, only that the town felt different. Sam took his usual seat by the window at Marv's Coffee, stirring sugar into his cup, the morning sun warming the worn wood of the booth. Marv himself wandered over, scratching his head. "Funny thing," Marv said, chuckling softly. "Looks like those two troublemakers finally moved on. Sheriff said he didn't have nothing to do with it." Sam looked up from his coffee, a slight smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Good riddance," he said simply. Marv nodded, clapped him lightly on the shoulder, and wandered off to refill another customer's cup. Sam sipped his coffee, the warm bitterness grounding him. Out the window, Redridge basked in the golden light of a new day. Children rode their bikes freely again. The old dog lay stretched across the hardware store's porch, snoring in peace. The flag above the post office caught a sudden breeze, snapping crisply in the blue sky, and Sam Dalton, veteran of 2 wars and countless battles unseen, sat quietly at his corner booth, unnoticed, uncelebrated. Exactly how he wanted it. The protector no one asked for. The savior no one knew. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and let us know what part spoke to you the most. And feel free to share your own experiences. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow.